it for some other reason. So thanks, Lakshmi, for accepting it. I request Dr. Rajesh Pachimetla to introduce this resource person for the session.
Thank you, sir. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's session to speaker, Lakshmi Narayanan Raju. He is a distinguished professional with over 20 years of experience in the IT industry, specializing in telecom inventory management and networking, provisioning, and process optimization. And he holds a postgraduate program in AI and machine learning from Texas McCombs School of Business, and is certified as a Google Cloud Professional Architect and a TM Forum Certified Digital Maturity Model Practitioner. And Lakshmi's extensive background spans critical roles at Verizon, where he spent 16 years managing broadband, DWDM, Ethernet, and private IP product inventories. Beyond his technical expertise, Lakshmi is a thought leader and the author of The Alchemy of Leadership, Transforming Self and Teams. This is his book title, where he shares valuable insights on leadership, team development, and self-transformation. His skills extend beyond telecom and into advanced technologies like business intelligence, data visualization, and process optimization, where he has a particular expertise in using tools like Celonis to drive operational efficiency. Today, we are fortunate to hear from someone who has both technical acumen and leadership vision to drive change and innovation across industries. Please join me in welcoming Lakshmi Narayan Raju. Sir, the session is yours. You can continue, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, good morning, everyone. I would like to thank Dr. Rajesh and Dr. Nalin for providing me an opportunity to present one of my articles on how we can bring in the geospatial network intelligence towards improving the customer experience. So it's a topic that is very close to every one of our lives by experience. And it is also a topic that every telco is trying to break the holy grail on. So we'll start with a little bit of an anecdote. So how many times in our life where we have seen that we have got into a situation of no mobile connectivity? So I hope all of you could relate to. I understand it is a crowd from all over India. I'm going to quote from a movie. It's Panjatantram, right? Wherein the chief protagonist Ram for the movie, right? And this could happen in a lot of our homes as well, right? And he's a pilot. He flies from Jaipur to Delhi. It's an hypothetical scenario. And while in the middle of the flight, his flight, it's a Boeing 737 MAX, it develops a technical snag. And he has to crash land somewhere in the Thar Desert. Right? Now, having crash landed, he has to call his family and his wife, Maithili, and tell her that, see, this is what happened. Right? So he calls, and then somewhere in the middle of the conversation, one of the passengers calls for help. I need you. Right? And then she continues, bro, please help me. Right? Between the I need you and the bro, please help me, right? His phone takes a vacation. Okay, meaning that he lost signal. Right? Remember the other person who's on the other side receiving this call, and she's not able to hear everything. She hears it in bits and pieces, right? The entire context of what the other person is going through and suffering, it gets lost. Now, our protagonist, Ram, he tries to find some way or the other to tell his spouse, see, this is what is happening, right? So he finds the nearest tree, tallest and nearest tree, somewhere in the middle of the Thar Desert. Tries to say hello, right? So all he tries to do is hello, and he does not have any freaking clue what his spouse is thinking, right? So I'm sure a lot of us have been into that kind of a scenario with a mobile network and with our own mobiles, right? So can you hear me now, right? So that's a struggle all of us go through on a day-to-day basis. Then the second one is the single bar of doom, wherein you go to an unknown place while in the middle of something, you find that you are losing signal and your mobile phone is no longer be able to send and receive data, or forget its ability to do calls, right? And of course, there are dead zones wherein there is completely a lack of signal, right? So this is a very, very common problem from a mobile network perspective. It's not just in the US, and it's also in India, right? So we all have this. Now, before even we go and talk about what it is, right? We have to define what is customer experience for the people, and how is it always measured by other telco, right? So I know the topic is all about geospatial network intelligence. Now, why am I talking customer experience, right? So there are two reasons why we go into the customer experience. Number one, before even I set a context, I need to give you the two views of the customer experience. You have a view of what you and me see as the service, which is the experience of the individual. And then there is always a view from the service provider. Right? So this is a largely Indian crowd, so the service provider could be a Geo or an Airtel. And they always, I'm only talking Geo Airtel, of course, there is BSNL, Idea Cellular, and so on and so forth, right? So the two biggest brands, I keep them as the on the table from a comparison standpoint, and I have no bias or prejudice against any brand, right? So we have to define customer experience, and the customer experience is always unfolding itself in two ways. One is what the customer sees, and the other one is how the telco sees it, right? So that it is a cycle, and it is how telcos measure experience, and that is also the cycle how we go through before we take a service and use the service. So it is the learn, buy, use, and pay cycle, right? So learn is when you go to a provider and you look at what plans he has got to offer. Almost every other provider has comparable plans with different names of their own, but not just looking at the plans. You also would like to know whether this plan suits me and whether this provider suits me, right? Let's say that I'm from Chennai, and if I frequent to my native place, right, somewhere in South Tamil Nadu, then I'll be interested in knowing whether this provider has good signals in my native village as well as whether he has good signals in Chennai, right? And let's say that Dr. Nalin or Dr. Rajesh, if they want to go to, if they are buying a service, they will want to know whether the premises around SSN has got good coverage with the provider, and whether at their own native places or in different places where their residences are, they have good coverage. That's the learn phase of the purchase process. Right? Once you've decided that, okay, my provider is BSNL,
Lakshmi, can you
neither
hear
of
me?
the private parties have good coverage. I'm sorry, someone has something.
Lakshmi, yeah. It's me, Nalin here.
Yes,
I think you are oscillating and the voice is coming and going. So there is a breakup here. So voice is
okay,
coming and going. It's pulsating. So
okay.
yeah.
Is it
So
any
if you
better?
now it's better. If you're closer, it's much
Okay,
better. Yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll try to stay as
Yeah.
close as the microphone
Yeah.
as
Sure.
possible. That's the
Thanks,
problem. Okay.
Lakshmi. Yeah. Bye.
Yeah. Okay. So I was talking about the learn phase of it, and then we have the buy phase of it, right? So the buy phase is primarily when you have made the call that BSNL is my provider of choice, and I'm signing up for it, right? You go to the provider, fill in the form, give your details, and then you get the service. Get the SIM card, you get activated. That's the end of buy phase, right? Once it is activated, that is when the use phase comes in, right? That's when you turn yourself from being a prospect or a lead into a customer from a telco standpoint. And at that point onwards, you become you are going to paying you are going to be paying for your usage, and at that point onwards, telco has to get revenue out of you, right? And then, of course, finally, you completed your 3 month a month of usage, and then you have to start paying for your services, right? So this is the customer experience cycle for you as a customer. Now, for this, there is also an equivalent cycle that the telco goes through, right? The telco has to know what plans he can sell and who are his customers demographically, right? Someone like while I used to be in college, Vodafone was one of the major providers in terms of high ARPUs in India, because Vodafone were targeting high revenue earning customers, and they had a good share of the market in India. Right now, that's the demographic profile of the customers, right? Whether these customers are my target customers, what is it that I can sell to them, and what is it that will resonate well with them, right? So that's what the telcos are interested in, the learn phase of it. And then you have the buy phase, wherein at that moment the telcos know that the customer has signed a contract. Now you have to validate whether this person will be able to pay me the bill, right? I have not called that out, but that's a very important thing they do when they take your order, right? They have to validate whether you will be able to pay his bills for the plan that you are signing up for. And there is an order capture process which covers this, your proof of identity and the other things, which is required from a compliance perspective and from a regulatory perspective. And then you have to be onboarded, you have to be given a SIM, and the SIM has to be activated. And once the SIM activation starts, this is where the crux of our presentation is on, right? Which is service assurance, fault management, and network performance monitoring. Even more specific, we are going to talk about network performance monitoring, right? Network performance monitoring also has two sides of it. And while most of the telcos are working on the domain of the telco view of the customer experience, what I'm trying to talk about is you better don't just look at it the way you look at things, look at it the way the customer would see it, right? That's what I'm trying to talk about it. And that's what most of the telcos, not most, almost none of the telcos has it and has addressed it even now, right around the world, because they somehow think that the telco view would suffice, or they do not want to invest in the other side of it, right? So we will talk about that as well as we go on. And then finally, when it comes to the pay cycle of it, the invoice generation and delivery, right? Making sure that every month on month, your usage is tracked, you are billed, and that bill is accurate, right? So that's a process that the telco goes through to provide you the customer experience, right? So I just wanted to set that context for everyone before we go in further, right? And then the second part of the customer experience journey, I would like to talk about how telcos use AI. Right, this is in alignment with the overall the overall view of what we are trying to do here in this program, right? So we not just look at it in terms of what the customer sees, what the telco sees, how AI is coming together to help the customer, right? Whether to provide you the comparison on the plans, maybe a generative AI solution could be put together to see what the competitors are offering and see and present you with content on how I'm differentiating myself, right? And then, of course, there is always a market research and analysis where the AI is used to try and see who the different demographics of the customers are, what they want, and there is a whole bunch of journey analytics and audience insight management that the telcos go through to provide you what you need in terms of either marketing content or in terms of the plans that you may use, right? And then even in buy phase, the fraud verification is very, very important. Again, this varies from country to country. In a country like US, upfront they want to make sure that they are acquiring a good customer, right? This may not be as enforced as it is in India, but So that's an area where AI is used. And of course, you have to make sure that from the time you pay for to sign the contract to the time you are able to get the service, whether everything is happening properly or not. We have AI on that as well, right? And where the use is the one area where the telcos are spending tons and tons of money to try to connect the dots, because it's insanely complicated, and there are various players in it. And this is the area where the telco ecosystem is spending tons and tons of money to get a crack at it, right? And then finally the pay phase of it. So there also there is a lot of ML used for doing the predictions in terms of churn, and in terms of trying to see how I could minimize my financial losses, right? The revenue assurance is another area where AI is used in a big way. Nalin, hope I'm coming in clearly now, right?
Yes.
And
Yes,
yeah,
Lakshmi.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move back, right? So we set the context. We saw what the customer journey is from a telco perspective as well as from a customer perspective, and come back to this concept of a quality and coverage, right? A lot of us in India think, why is it important, right? So this is this is a graph that all of you can have access to. It's got from nperf.com. And if you see that, it gives you the coverage zones of on the India map, which zones have the 5G coverage, which zones have 4G coverage, and which zones have 3G coverage. And there are, as you could see, there are dead zones all across India, right? So if you could read the map, there are areas of Gujarat and Rajasthan where there are no coverage zones, and there is a part of Odisha, MP region which is no coverage, right? And then there is a good amount of space which exists, right? So that's where what these carriers advertise as speeds. Okay, you sign up with me, I give you 10 Gbps, or sorry, 1 Mbps or whatever, right? So what they advertise versus what they sell, it may or may not be true, right? And what works in my residence in Chennai might not work in my residence in my native village, right? And even within Chennai, right? Now, forget India, right? Talk about Dallas, where I reside. I'm paying a good plan with a good provider here, who's one of the top 3 here. I'm not going to talk about who the provider is, but I go to certain places which are crowded, urban areas, where even here my phone goes into the single bar of doom, right? Wherein I could not have any access to data whatsoever. And there are segments in Dallas airport which has dead zones where the phone fails to work. Okay. And then, of course, the roaming riddle, right? I go somewhere, as you could see in the coverage map, there are areas where I could not get coverage as well. So both the quality and coverage are a problem, right? Which we are trying to solve. How do we solve it? Okay. So that's where we need to understand a little bit about how the network is laid out, right? So again, this is a fairly generalized view of the network to keep things simple, considering my audience, right? So the network has always 2 sides of it, and considering the way the customer is treated, or the way the customer service is treated, the customer itself comes across as 3 different customers, right? One is an area where we are trying to do a lot, which is bringing in capabilities like the smart energy meters, right? We have smart devices everywhere. These are basically require a high degree of reliability of service, because what is measured at a device level, it has to get to the other end of the network. So the reliability is most important here, and it can work on low bandwidth, right? If it's an energy meter at your home, which is measuring the wattage consumption, at a particular predetermined time of the month, the energy meter has to send its readings. Otherwise, the utility company, which is for example, Tamil Nadu Electricity Board, it will never be able to generate the bill. So while the data it is going to send, it could be just the wattage consumption data, that could be small, but the reliability characteristic of that particular connection, the smart meter, is expected to be extremely high, right? It cannot fail under any circumstance to send your reading on every 15th of the month. If you have if your billing cycle is on a monthly scale on the 15th, right? So the most important point that I wanted to emphasize in terms of the smart energy meter is the reliability, right? Then you have the autonomous vehicle. That is the second kind of the consumer for the mobile telephone companies, right? These autonomous vehicles are bandwidth hungry, right? And at the same time, you are okay to have a flaky connection, but you should have a good degree of connectivity, right? These are autonomous vehicles. They have enormous compute powers. They will be able to download maps for the whole journey, keep them with it, and as and when they are able to connect, they can connect to the backend. And when they do connect, they may be bandwidth hungry, right? And the bandwidth characteristics of an autonomous vehicle could be very huge, but at the same time, you are okay on reliability perspective, right? Meaning that your connection can turn flaky at times, but whenever it works, it has to work well. Okay. And then your smartphones, right? Smartphones are the closest things that you and me as human beings are very much used to. And we will be able to talk experience in terms of smartphones, right? Your primary purpose of a phone is it is a device with which you can communicate with someone through the voice, right? And then, of course, there are a whole lot of bells and whistles these companies have built, where now the smartphone is also getting used as a personal assistant and also as some form of pseudo computer computing mechanism, right? So that's the characteristic of a smartphone. So these are three different devices or three different end user profiles that the cell phones the telcos will have to manage, right? So your communication goes to the cell phone tower, right? And from the cell phone tower, it goes to the base station subsystem as radio waves, right? At that point, these radio waves will have to be converted into the digital medium, and it has to be sent across the backhaul to the provider network, right? And from there on, if it is a data access, it goes to the internet, and if it is a voice access, it goes to the plain old telephone network. Okay, so the most important challenge that telcos have is knowing what the customer's experience is on the left side of the spectrum, right? Your mobile phone or the autonomous car or the smart energy meter, whatever it is, right? What they have is what they control, right? The cell tower, the base station subsystem, or the provider network level, those are the assets the telcos own and operate. Okay, so that's where their sphere of control lies. Now, if I have to measure your customer experience, right? How is the customer experience for Dr. Nalin or Dr. Rajesh, right? So how do I build the quality experience score for the customers that I have or Lakshmi, right? So you need to look at least four factors, right? The number one is the network factor. Okay, so what is my throughput? When I say throughput, it's basically the max upload and download speeds that I'm able to realize as a customer, right? So I'm sorry, I think I went into the next slide by mistake. Okay, so we talked about throughput. Then you have the latency and jitter, right? Latency is how much amount of time the data that I send over the network it takes to go and come back to me. Okay, Then the jitter is the variation in latency, right? How it goes up and down as I start using it, and how much amount of packets I'm losing. These are all characteristics of the network that you may be able to experience. Okay, so the network characteristics of throughput, latency, jitter, and packet loss are the easy ones to measure either at the end user device level or at the telco network level, right? You can do it both ways. Okay, so I'll go back one slide. So you have the provider network or in the internet at any stage. If there are simple Ethernet devices or if you have IP devices, you will be able to measure all these characteristics at this end, right? Then comes the signal characteristic, right? There is I've mentioned a very small bunch of the signal characteristic here, but there could be more, right? What is my RSRP? What is my RSRQ, right? What is my RSCP? And what is my SINR, right? What is my CQI? These are the signal parameters or the radio frequency measures that I need to try and understand what is the signal strength of the customer at the on the receiving device, right? Whether the good signal strength can translate into a good user experience? No, right? Even when you have good signal strength, if there is congestion in your network, you may not be able to get a good experience, right? And when there is no congestion, absolutely, right? And if my signal strength is not so good, then again your experience will suffer. Then there is a whole bunch of disturbances in the ecosystem, and the whole the mobile telephony network, the way it is constructed in terms of hierarchical cells, that can also come in the way of you getting a good experience. The interference, right? The house that where I live in, the amount of trees that are encircling my house, and the kind of walls that I have in my house, all of that can interfere with my mobile signal quality and my data experience quality, right? What type of device I'm using to access, whether I'm using a phone that has a high-end computing capability, whether I have a phone that has good thermal dissipation capabilities, and what kind of memory profile I have, that has a role to play, right? And of course, contextual information in terms of where I am, right? Am I traveling or am I stationary, right? And am I present in an environment where I'm the only person present, or am I present in, let's say, for example, the M.A. Chidambaram Stadium in Chennai, where the entire Chennai is present for watching an India-Australia match, right? So depending on where I am, that also plays a role in terms of my how my mobile experience is, right? And at what time of the day am I having this? All of these factors contribute to the user experience. So every telco has their own way of capturing the user experience, and they construct or they try to construct something called as a network twin, right? They try to model your profile within them, and they try to see what user experience you are getting. There is a customer experience score and there is a network experience score. They look at both, and there are algorithms to capture and to calculate them, right? Now, how am I going to capture this, right? As I said, the telcos have absolutely, they have no control over this. All they have is a control over this. Why? Right? That's where the challenge part of the data capture comes in, which I'm trying to see how we may be able to solve it. Right? You may have an iPhone, right, which does not have a lot of capabilities to give access to the radio APIs, right? Again, this may not be absolutely relevant from an India context, because India, the top or the most number of mobile phones that are sold in India are not technically the iOS devices, which have that restriction built in. But even Android, which opens up a lot of these signal parameters, does not have every parameter that the telco needs open, wherein you will be able to get them, capture them, and send them back for further analytics to measure what is your typical user experiences, right? Not every KPI that you need is present at the device level, right? So how do I overcome this, right? How do I overcome this data capture challenges? That's when you have the geospatial data revolution that I'm talking about comes into play, right? So this is a concept wherein you may be able to do something like what the Google is doing, right? So Google, when they put together the maps, they equipped their cars with street level data capture capabilities, right? They mounted cameras, multiple cameras on cars. They send these cars across the length and breadth of the world, trying to capture the key inputs on where the stop signs are, where the signals are, where the commercial facilities are, how big is the road, all that elaborate amount of data they captured. So the idea that I'm suggesting or alluding towards is we should have this data capture done in a systemic fashion, right? How do the telcos do it? They do it by doing what they call as a drive test, where a technician might walk around, or the technician might do focused data capture drives, wherein they get the data, right, and then they relay it back, right? But that is not a dedicated way of capturing data, because this dedicated data capture is required because the street profiles can change, the interferences can change, from neighborhood to neighborhood, or from a remote area to a rural area. Right now, again, all of these settings can change. So having a dedicated data collection fleet with multi-carrier SIM cards that can provide you the most accurate information on what this experience is. Now, having a dedicated data collection fleet running the length and breadth of the country or countries may not be completely feasible, right? That's when the second option comes into play, which is the field service integration. Every telco has a field services fleet who do two different things. One is they build out capacity on the network because of the way so most carriers are now doing 5G. 5G has a lot of small cell build requirements, wherein these people go and keep on building the small cell after small cells, right? There is a hierarchy of the site infrastructure that these guys build. So maybe these field service trucks can have the dedicated data capture devices, so that as and when they go, they are dispatched out to do their work, they can do the data capture as a secondary purpose. And the telcos also employ an enormous amount of people for doing their work. These employees also can be provided these data capture devices that they can mount on their on their personal vehicles and help them bring the data back home, right? So these are different strategies of data capture, and this data capture is absolutely necessary to measure the real quality of experience that the user has, because without knowing what the end user is going through, right, you will never ever be able to give him a reliability of service that he may think that he should get. Okay. And if I have to do this, right, this kind of a dedicated data collection fleet, how do I do it, right? I need equipments. I need equipments which can do this work for me, right? And what kind of devices, right? Most of the time, the human mind always think that, can't I just use the mobile phones, right? The mobile phones are not the answers, because when you are doing it as a in a professional setting, you need sophisticated devices. You need the radio frequency scanners and analyzers, right? So there are a bunch of examples that I have posted here, which can capture this data and push it into a centralized repository, right? And then you need network testing tools, right? The most Common one among network testing tool that all of us could have seen is the Ookla speed test, right? Most of the time, as soon as we got our broadband connectivity at our home, we would have used Ookla to see or measure what kind of bandwidth I'm receiving. And of course, you need the GPS receivers to know where exactly the data capture is happening at any moment in time. And if there are challenges feeding the data back, then you need these devices mounted with specialized antennas as well, so that you can make sure that the data that you are capturing, it goes back, right? So that's the in terms of data acquisition so far. Once you have acquired the data, right, then comes the analytics part. So as I have already talked about, the quality experience score calculation happens through specific algorithms. Every telco have their own proprietary algorithms, which cannot be discussed, but they use this the parameters to calculate something as the quality experience score, right? So the QES score, I have tried to abstract it. One of the algorithms that is used by most of the telcos is K-means. K-means allow you to cluster your findings and classify them into a few buckets, right? You can call the customers who have the excellent quality experience score is one bucket, and then there is a customers who are getting a good quality experience score as one bucket, and then the fair and poor. Most of the time, these telcos, their primary focus is around 90% or 80 to 90% of their customers are within this excellent and good bucket, right? This is something that they expect all the time, right? And then the second thing, I've used Chennai as an example. I really apologize. There are people from all over the India attending this. I understand from Dr. Nalin. I have put in the areas to be as much as possible. I have taken North Chennai as an example to say that there are dead zones and hotspots exist where I could represent the poor and fair areas in a good way. But it is not, it is completely made up. It's nothing to do with the reality, right? So, but the point that I'm trying to drill down is I'll be able to measure the quality experience score by site. Why do I need to do this at a site level? Because at a site level, I get insights on where the congestion is and where the people are having a bad experience. Okay, because the geospatial network intelligence on one side, it is going to help the customer have a good experience with this telco ecosystem. But at the same time, the telco also needs to make sure that he plan for capacity, right? Areas which see good congestion and areas where the QES scores are fair and poor, they are the areas where these telcos will have to build out capacity, right? And that's the optimization of the network planning, right? And where there is congestion, they have to plan more, right? And where there is less congestion, they have to make sure that they don't have to overspend, right? So that's an important thing. And then, of course, once you have this intel at a competitor landscape perspective, it gives you the ability to differentiate your services, right? For example, you can build personalized buying experiences. For example, let's say that me as the customer, right? Let's say that you have a telco experience where the telco asks you questions. So, okay, tell me what are all the frequent places that you visit. Okay, I say that this is my native village. I go here at least once a month, right? This is where I work in Chennai, and I go and I live here, right? And then let's say that within Chennai, this is my work location. This is where I go for gym, and this is where I go for shopping, right? I key in all these parameters in a web page with the telco, and then the telco tells you, okay, at your native village, your quality experience score is good or fair. With this particular telco, right? And if you go with Geo, your quality experience score in your village is fair. But me being Airtel at your native village, I give an excellent quality experience score, right? I have an excellent quality experience score at your office. I have an excellent quality experience score at your residence. and at the gym, right? Which means that I have good coverage with the Airtel. Okay, so I can buy my service there. So this is a personalization on quality experience that the telco can provide if he is able to get that level of granular data capture, right? And when my scores are good, and the telco makes sure that 95 to 98% of their customers are having a good QoS scores, then there is no reason for these customers to leave the telco. So the first primary benefit of the QoS is reduced churn, right? Of course, provided he continues to invest in capacity to make sure that he improves the customers who are having a fair and poor quality experience score to good and excellent, right? That's going to be the contributing factor for the churn, right? And once the customer is happy, he's not going to leave the telco, right? Because end of the day, mobile has become mobile, and especially internet has become the second oxygen after food, right? So for human survival, that's how we have become so dependent on the data these days, right? And adding new customers also becomes a easy thing. And of course, operational efficiency is where you can find places to add capacity and invest in capacity. That also becomes easy from a telco perspective, right? So with that, we will look at what the cost considerations are. I've tried to work out a math from an India context, right? So let's say that you are building a fleet of 5 to 10 cars, and the typical cost of a car is somewhere between 10 lakhs to 20 lakhs, right? And you will be spending around 50 lakhs to around 2 crore rupees on the car, right? And then you need dedicated data capture technology, right? When I say dedicated data capture technology, we talked about the RF scanners, the GPS devices, and so on and so forth, right? So that also has money to be spent. And so we may be spending somewhere around 30 lakh rupees to 12 lakh rupees, right? Sorry, to 1.2 crores, right? So that's the cost of data capture devices. Okay. So, and then of course you have to spend on fuel and maintenance. You have to pay for if you are storing it in the cloud, you have to spend money on that as well, right? You may spend anywhere between 8 to 16 lakh rupees per year, depending on how much amount of data you are ingesting into the cloud, right? So all of this becomes your operational expenses for doing the data capture. Okay, so this is a one-time investment as well as a recurring investment, because after you have acquired the vehicles and you have mounted the vehicles with all these data capture devices, you have to keep driving them all across the country and keep gathering the data, right? So that's the recurring expense that you will keep spending. And then when you store the data in the cloud, you have to pay for that as well. Okay, so that's the cost consideration. And what do I get out of this spending money, right? So for each one of these, I have tried to work out a math in terms of how much you will be able to gain by doing this, right? You are at an ARPU of around 150 to 250 rupees per customer in an Indian context, right? And even if you are able to reduce churn by 1%, and let's say that you have around crore customers, for example, right? So, and if you are able to retain at least a lakh of customers, right, you will be able to save close to around 18 crores in terms of the amount of savings that you are able to make, right? Put in 180 million, right? Please apologize if I could not translate that into the into crores, right? Then of course you will be able to optimize your infrastructure, right? Investment. You may be able to save the cost on where your infrastructure goes, right? And you will be able to identify the network issues much more quicker, right? You at any point in time you will know where the trouble is, right? And since you are able to demonstrate the capability that your network is superior, you will always have the highest chance of acquiring the best customers and retaining the customers, right? And then once you are able to build a good ecosystem around yourself, you will be able to get additional revenue in terms of the services and partnerships, right? So putting all of that together, we are estimating that your annual benefits could be anywhere between almost $1 billion rupees of revenue, or the cost savings and revenue savings that the telco could make out of doing this geospatial, the telemetry, right, or gathering the data and making sure that you are able to have the granular level of data capture executed, right? So that's the customer view of data capture from a telco standpoint. Now, how do the telcos do it, right? Okay, so you are coming in and giving me gyan on something that I'm doing already on a day-to-day basis, right? So me as a telco, right, when I go talk to my friends in these carriers, what they do, right? They always have the option of capturing this at the every signal parameter that the end user device has, that is captured at the cell towers, right? So this information, these carriers, they get this data out of the what they call it as a G node Bs and E node Bs in terms of LTE and 5G. I'm telling it the vice versa. So the Ericssons of the world, the Nokias of the world, they keep, and Samsungs of the world, they feed this information from the cell towers to the telcos on a almost day-to-day basis, and it is more or less accurate with what the end user has, except for the interference characteristics, which will actually require the telcos to send their field to go and correlate and corroborate, right? So even with all of this, the drive tests, they basically do the drive test. Wherever they have a challenge, validating what they see on the G node B level, they do the drive test so that they can capture the data continuously, right? There are methodologies on how they do the drive test as well, right? They can rely on third parties. There are a lot of third parties who provide this data all around the world, who do the data capture at different levels, right? You may not be, the one parameter that you may not be able to capture as a third-party provider is the signal strength in a given location. That is the one important piece of information that none of these telcos have, which this case that I'm putting together is vouching for, right? The ability of a telco to do this information at an individual location level is what we are attempting to provide, right? And then, of course, once you have either you do this drive test or you do with third party provider, but of course they always have the real time data collection capability at their infrastructure level, right? That's what I started off with, right? They always have owned the network. They will be able to accurately capture the information as they see at their end, because end of the day, they are anyways having data at our individual call level, right? What call goes from what person to what person, whether the call drops, whether the call is good, whether there is a packet loss, whether there is a what is the speed that I get. All of that they will be able to get with some approximation, which they ingest into their data collection platforms and analytics platforms to make sure that they are able to um, they are able to get and generate insights on, right? So the quality experience scores can be calculated on an almost 15th minute interval basis. That kind of capabilities they have, because that's the 15th minute is the closest they get real-time data from the various sources, right? But that is also possible with the telcos. That's how they are working it around, right? To calculate the QES. So the QES is calculated even without the telcos doing what Google is doing. They have the data, but the only thing is it may not be the realistic reflection of of what one might have seen or experienced. So that's that's the only disadvantage I'm seeing. And finally,
I have one question, sir.
by doing this data capture, the customer experience could be enhanced, because since you have the experience at an individual street level captured by this dedicated network fleet, we will be able to model customer experience better, right? So with that, I would like to conclude. Maybe I may have closed it out a little bit ahead of time. Any questions from anybody, please?
I think Ashwin is having some question. I think Ashwin, you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for wonderful session. My question is regarding this, that if data fastness or speedness, if you can figure out, why can't you, or why can't we, for that matter, in general, find out the strength of the network?
Yeah. That's a good question, Ashwin. Right. So if I'm able to get the speed of data reception, right, will I not be able to tell my network is superior, right? But the mobile data capability is a factor of your signal strength, and it's a factor of your location, right? It's not just the speed. The speed profile, for example, of you, it could vary depending on where you are, right, and who is with you, and also on what kind of device you have. So there are lots and lots of parameters that basically determine your experience, Ashwin. Right, the speed is only one of the factors. If you would see my one of the slides where I had presented the quality experience score. Let me see if I'm still having the slide back. So any quality experience score that any telco does is a factor of these four, right? The speed is only one factor. It has to be enriched with these additional characteristics to calculate the true quality experience score.
One additional question I have, just as a just as an interesting query. That's it. Nothing much with regard to this. Why that you want the internet from any provider when the satellite systems are available for you in US?
Excellent question. Right. So that's the biggest problem that the telcos will have to tackle next, right? Because the satellite technology has matured to a great level where the telcos are now going to compete against a complete unknown. It is the biggest disruption in the telecom world. Is this satellite technology? Okay, now I have seen the satellite technology at its infancy way back in 2006, while I was with Verizon. At that point in time, the primary limiting factor on the satellite was Verizon at that time was not able to go beyond 1.5 Mbps in terms of the speed. Right now, that has been overcome. Right, they are able to give better speeds by the latest advancements in satellite technology. But again, it is we will have to see whether the satellite technology will be able to hold out their promise in different weather conditions and in congestions, right? Because 5G as a technology was excellent, and it is giving me good speeds as long as I do not get into the congested areas, or as long as I am present in the same place, right? The real test of 5G comes when I start moving. Okay, so satellite may be able to do that beamforming to the end user device because it is always mapped. But how it's going to behave with scale is something that currently, at least, I do not have the data to speak about. So we have to wait and see.
Okay.
And as of now, it is expensive also for anybody. So even in US, the average revenue per customer for the internet services are anywhere between $50 to $70. But with satellite technology, it is the last time when I tried to get one Starlink system, it was around $150 per month. Okay, it's substantially higher. Okay, even though I get better speeds. So one would always look at what I get for the money that I pay and whether I need that, right? Sometimes something becomes a luxury, right? So the telcos are focused on the mass market, which is the average people like you and me who might be able to get away with 100 Mbps max speeds. You don't need more than that, right? So there are a lot of things at play. So at least in the immediate horizon, I'm not seeing a threat because of satellite until the prices come down and the satellite is able to stand the test of congestion, right? When you have millions of people there. Yeah.
Sir, I think satellite cost less right now. Maybe that is the problem with regard to the customers that are in line. So,
Mm-hmm.
or else, as far as what I have gone through, that if the too many customers are there, satellite would be much cheaper than the tower network system what we have.
True, absolutely true, right? But again, we have to really see whether it can stand the test of that of the scale, right? So that's something that we have to see. Okay, so I have seen in another technology, right? The wave, for example, when the wave technology came in first into the world, right? There was unlimited potential on the amount of bandwidth that you will be able to inject into a single wavelength or a lambda. But the device capability was around 1G and then 10G later, right? As of now, we have devices that can do up to 400G on the backbone, right? Or even more. The last I know is 400G, right? On a commercial scale. So that much potential was able to be realized through the optical devices, through using DWDM technology. But the satellite technology, we do not know whether it can stand that congestion test and whether it can hold good. We have to still wait and see.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I think Dr. Praveen Sam has one more question, I think. Sir,
Okay.
you can unmute and then.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Thank you for that. I mean, I'm not a technology person. Consider me as a very basic user of technology. I have got a doubt.
Yes, please.
I don't know. Very, very technical. But after listening to you for a while, I got a feel that, okay, so the telco system, which can kind of maybe kind of assess the speed and assess the width and other things. For example, I live in a house. I use internet connectivity, be it ATAL or any other provider. I have fluctuations, so I go to telco and ask it to analyze, okay, what is happening in my system. So it tells, okay, today this is what has happened to your system, and there's a reason why, blah, blah, all those stuff. So my question is, if I give data or if I give data for example, past 1 year, like what was the time the internet was very low and when it was very good. So maybe that kind of very basic data, if I can feed into telco, can it predict like how it will function for next 1 year?
Okay.
Maybe considering the data, is there any pattern in the fluctuation, or if it's functioning properly at the right speed at what time? If these are considered as data, if this data is fed into telco, can it tell me how what kind of experience as a customer I'll get from this particular service in the future?
Okay, so let me try to think aloud, right? So this is the speed that I get. Will I be able to tell over the next 1 year will I get the same speed? That is one question, right? So that is a factor of what is the potential new additions that could go into your into wherever you live, right? So if you are living in an area which has more potential for future growth, okay. For example, you have just moved into a new location and there are more residences to come in, right? So then that technically means that your experience is going to get bad with time, right? Because the congestion is something that the telcos will have to plan capacity on, right? And the second thing is, let's say that you are in a fairly congested place, like T Nagar in Chennai, for example, right? So there is less scope for further congestion, right? Then the secondary parameter that comes into play is what kind of a bandwidth usage that people will have. Okay, so when I used to be a kid, I did not require an internet connection to watch TV. Okay, all I required was the antenna setup hooked into the TV, and I was able to watch. And these days, the people do everything through the Netflix or an Amazon Prime or an IPTV, right? So everything goes through the internet. And then the secondary question is, what is going to be the size of these families and what the demographics of the family is, right? They do, when the family demographics change, and how many people are going to be the gaming customers in your home, right? You have your kids, and your kids are if your kid is a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, he's not going to be a heavy gaming user, right? If you have bigger kids, they are going to be big time into gaming, right? So if the demographic information is available, then yes, we will be able to tell with certainty whether you will have the guaranteed bandwidth or not. If the demographic information is not available, it is very hard to tell, right? So that's a problem that the telcos have also. No telco, they are paying for this data from third parties in US. I don't know how it works in India on trying to predict what the demographics are, right? There are dedicated initiatives around who my prospects are, from which country or what kind of country these people have moved in from, and how many children they have, what age groups their children are, what they watch, right? So these people are trying to build that digital twin to try and understand customer behavior, because without that data, nobody will be able to tell you what your experience with your internet connection is going to be. But if none of these changes, you will have a good experience. I hope I answered. But to cut a long story short, that level of data, none of the telcos have as of now.
Maybe if it comes in the future, then I'll know what kind of internet experience I'll have for the next at least a month or so, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Any more questions from the participants? Okay, so if there are no questions, I think we came to the end of the session. Thank you, Lakshmi, for that concise and richly informative session. I mean, we can see your deep expertise in this telecom inventory management and network provisioning and optimization. And I'm sure people who are working in this area might have benefited greatly from your actionable insights. So on behalf of everyone, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you for Lakshmi for joining us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks all of you, distinguished faculty, for giving me an opportunity to speak in this forum. Thanks a lot, Dr. Nalin and Dr. Rajesh.
Yeah, one information I would like to add for all the participants and everyone. And Lakshmi is basically a chemical engineer. Yeah. So that is the one thing which I would like to add here. So So a chemical engineer transformed into you can see he's analyzing telecommunications company's data.
It looks like a twist in the climax.
Yeah. So thanks, Lakshmi.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
Yeah,
Neil.
thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, participants. So please fill the feedback form, and Rajesh, please share it in the chat box as well as in the group.
It's the same link. You can just
Same
open
link,
it and session 2, you can select and the feedback.
So it's the same link. There's a drop down menu. Session 2, Lakshmi's talk will be there. So you can provide the feedback. Lakshmi will share the feedback. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll share the feedback with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your time.
Thanks everyone. Have a good night, and tomorrow we will have day 2 session started.
Day 2 session.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.